All right, I believe that's 1 o'clock, and so there's one thing that I learned in the Marine Corps was start on time, end on time. Actually, if we could end early, that would probably be a plus, I'm sure, for many involved. And so Travis is joining me here, Mr. Travis Van Dusen. Today, so we've got a webinar on tap for everyone. You've stumbled into hopefully the right place, but you've stumbled into find and hire the right employee. Man, this is a topic that Travis and I get very frequently. Not a day almost goes by where we're not talking to a client or a prospect or just general counsel to businesses where they're talking about trying to find the right folks. And even in this environment is even a little bit more challenging. So we hear this a lot, don't we, Travis?
Yeah, we absolutely do. And the one thing we hear more often than anything is, man, hiring is expensive, and that's 100% true. And on average, it's costing companies around $4,000 per hire just to get that recruiting process done. And as small business owners, we're really tasked to try to figure this out and make it work on a scale that sometimes we have a hard time competing in. And one of the things that I noticed early on was a lot of hiring managers don't have a lot of confidence in hiring people. In fact, statistics show that 3 out of 4 hiring managers, or maybe it's the business owners, will openly admit that they have actively not hired the right person. But they've admitted after they've hired someone, they pretty much knew right away that it was the wrong person. And the problem with that is, if you continue to do that, every time you have to turn over a position, on average, it's going to cost you around $15,000 on average to replace that employee. Because keep in mind, once you've paid the expense to bring them into the organization, you've recruited them. Now you have to train them, you have to resource them, you have to give all these things to them to get them up to speed. So you're going to spend about $15,000 just to get a new employee to the point to where they're ready to go. And if in 2 or 3 months down the road you're losing them, this can get very expensive very quickly. And the reality is, for most of us, if we decide to hang on to those bad people, it becomes a ripple effect across our whole organization or across the company. When we keep bad hires, when we keep bad employees on our team, it does nothing but cause issues. It causes friction amongst staff, and your high performers tend to become lower performers, and it just does not create an environment where we can really be successful. So what we really want to talk about today is just some of the things that we've seen, some mistakes we've seen made, kind of what recruiting processes look like, and just give you guys kind of a high-level overview today of what all those things look like.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we underestimate all the time as business owners or managers or HR folks, because we've got quite a collection on the call or the webinar today, is we underestimate that cost of turnover, or sometimes we refer to it as churn. And so, that turnover, it can be very expensive in many different areas that are hard to track and hard to keep up with. Well, that's Travis. You heard from him. So Travis is our learning and development guy. He's been on board with us for a little over a year now. He's really been helping small businesses focus in on kind of their management and their leadership and then recruiting and kind of hiring, and that's what we're talking about today. But I'm Brian. I'm the employee benefits guy. I'm the insurance guy. And so, we've teamed up today to kind of talk about this really important topic. There are several core areas, 5 core areas that we focus in on in our learning and development here at Upstream. Today, we're really talking about attract and retain talent, attraction and retention. So we're specifically talking about recruitment. And so going to hire and focus in on that next key employee. And so that's kind of where we're at today. And so speaking of that, right, when we talk about attraction, retention, or recruitment, what we're really talking about is is beyond kind of the traditional benefits. I work with clients all day long where we work in employee benefits, health insurance, dental, vision, all that good stuff, and that's super important to employees today, and it's a very important tool for employers to have to attract and retain. But really, these days, we're going beyond that now, and we're looking at a lot of these other core areas, important things as well in learning and development, growing and maturing your folks. And so because, small businesses, there is a little bit of a labor shortage going on, right? We're kind of in a healthy place for employment, right? We have low unemployment, and so it makes it harder for folks to find those key employees. Well, that's really impacting the bottom line, especially if you lose a key employee and now you're perhaps filling those man hours with someone else. And then we talked about replacing employees as well, can cost 2 times more than the annual salary. So it's going to take a good bit just to get them in the door and then onboard them and help them get up to speed in your culture or the position that they're filling. And so there's just lots of pieces to making sure that attraction and retention goes a long way in your favor as a business, because you want someone, as Travis said, you want someone who's going to come in and fit well, someone who you're not going to have to hire for that particular position, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, because that can be very expensive, is what we talked about. And so there's a lot going on in this particular space, and that's why we just kind of want to get into it and talk about that. So what does that process look like, Travis? I mean, we kind of talked about it, but we know that it's a process for sure.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that we know up front, and these are just statistics that you could find anywhere from Career Builder to any of the other recruiting sites, is it takes around 42 days to recruit a position, and that's probably on the low end in some cases. And it's going to take about 23 to 24 days to really move past all the back and forth with a potential hire before you're going to make an offer. And then, like I said before, it's going to cost you around $4,000 to make that hire. But let's just talk about the recruiting process as a whole. One of the biggest mistakes that I see when I'm working with business owners is that one of the things they struggle with the most is they come to me, or they come to Brian and they say, I really feel like I need to fill this position. I need to put I need to lighten the load on this individual. And they begin to say, well, I want to recruit someone to take on some of this, to be able to balance my organization out, balance my company out. And we begin to ask some very simple questions. And what we come to realize is that they don't really know what they're looking for. So one of the first things you have to do as a business owner or a recruiter is you're going to have to really get clear on what are you looking for in the person that you're recruiting. What skills do they need? What demeanor do they need? What personality type are you looking for that's going to mesh well with the team or be able to do the job? Too often we don't have those questions figured out up front, and that's got to be one of the harder pieces. We have to have that clarity before we can begin recruiting for the position. Then after that, we jump into writing out the job description, right? We got to build that job description. We got to hopefully build it to a point to where people will be people who are qualified will actually apply for the position. Then we got to figure out where's our best place to advertise. We have experienced that there's a couple different places that are great to post, and some of those maybe you spend a little bit, some you spend a little less. But I'll tell you now that based on what we've learned, and just basically through our process of elimination, it's not really based on which search engine's better or which platform is better to post your job posting. It's actually dependent upon what are you looking for. So you got to know, where am I going to post? What am I going to put the job posting up? Then you got to source and you got to screen the candidates. And then depending on how many applications you get, sometimes it can be 50, 60, 70 applications, and you've got to sift through those and figure all this out. I hope by now I'm raising your blood pressure just a little bit, give you a little bit of anxiety, because this is what a lot of business owners go through, and they dread the moment they have to step into this space. Another thing is maybe you need to use assessments. Maybe you want to assess their their personality, or you want to assess some type of skills that they have. So now you're looking at assessments to bring in these people into your organization. Then you're getting to that point where you're conducting the interviews, and you're doing multiple interviews in some cases, and then finally maybe you're narrowing it down. You're making the offer, and guess what? The hard work just began. When you get them in the door, now you have to onboard them. You have to train them. You have to resource them. Recruiting is something I think that a lot of small business owners, I hope that you guys don't go through that often. But too often I think that it's because it's something that is not something we go through a lot as small business owners, that we struggle with trying to get through all these steps and getting it done right.
And I think I think that first step that you mentioned, defining the role, and trying to figure out exactly who you need to fit in that role, is a step that you look at it on face value. You're like, oh, okay, I can kind of figure that out on the fly and keep moving. But I would think that would be the most crucial step. I had a chance to talk to a company that said, hey, we want to hire a salesperson. We need to put someone in that role. We need to fill that one. And we got to talking, and I said, well, it seems like you need the most help in service. Sounds like sales is working just fine. But it was the owner's natural inclination towards sales because that's where he had been for a long time. So he thought, well, I need to put someone in that spot to help me free up and do some other things. That's a good idea, but they had the most need in service. And so just really defining and understanding went a long way. And you may not even need to recruit. You may figure out that Travis is in the right spot, and if you just move this person around and add this thing, you could maybe skip that particular recruitment round, save it for another day. And so, but this is a crucial kind of step that you don't want to miss for sure. It's a significant one. Well, if I've messed up some steps, I'm sure, like missing that first one and really defining that role. But I'm sure we've seen other folks have some missteps as well. So what do we do wrong in this space, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, there's a list a mile long, and so many things I've made mistakes on myself going through this. I spent 10 years in aviation as a senior manager, and so I've done lots of interviewing. I've done interviewing on, at the management level all the way down to entry level positions. And some of these things I'm going to share with you are actually birthed out of my own experiences, and some of them are just observations that I've made. But I'd say the first major thing we go wrong with is probably around the not doing our due diligence. We don't do our due diligence as hiring managers, as business owners. We focus way too much on the resume. We want to check as many boxes as we can with the resume. And while a lot of you may need to recruit for very specific items as far as like qualifications, I try to encourage people not to lean solely on the resume when it comes to recruiting. And what I mean by doing due diligence is, once we get past the basic acceptance of, okay, these are the things that I need to, these are the boxes that have to be checked for this position, that we focus on getting things, focusing on the more intangibles like attitude, like their worth ethic, like their ability to work with other people well. I mean, the goal is not to just hire someone, but it's to find someone who fits your culture. The qualifications are all good, but we want to find someone who fits the culture. And what I mean by that is they mutually want to be there with you. It's not going to work. You can have the most qualified individual in the world, but if they don't align with your culture and how you do things, because that's what culture is how we do things, then it's just not going to work. So we want to make sure we're doing our due diligence up front to make sure that this person not only has the skills and the qualifications that we need, but we're also making sure they align with us from a culture perspective and from their attitude and all those things that we just discussed. That too often doesn't happen. And therefore we hire people, they get into the position, and then we realize we have a crisis and issue with issues that are not necessarily related to their ability to do the job. A second thing we do is we make way too many assumptions. We assume because they come from a certain university or they have a certain level of experience, well, because someone's been in this position for 10 years, we assume they're the best that could be there. But my experience is there's a lot of people who've been in a position for 10 years and is just going through year one over and over and over. They're not making an immense amount of progress, where you may find someone who only has like 2 or 3 years of experience, but has rapidly grown each year. And if you're not going to learn that about that person until you really do your due diligence on digging into them. Don't make assumptions about everybody that you're hiring. Make sure you really dig in and try to get to the facts. Another area is the lack of resources, just simply you don't have the tools. Too often, small business owners are great entrepreneurs they were solo entrepreneurs for a long time. They were doing things on their own, and then suddenly now they're being tasked with hiring for the first time or hiring for a position that's making them nervous. They're unsure. So they've never been resourced. They've never been taught or trained how to recruit successfully. Or it's someone who's gone up through the ranks and, they started at the bottom and now they're moving up. And I love to work with leaders that are like that, but you don't learn these things just naturally through moving up through the ranks. And it's something you have to observe and you have to learn. So a lack of resources. And then lastly is interview bias. This is something that we don't even realize most of the time, but just think about it from the perspective of stereotyping, inconsistency in the questions you're asking. I've worked with teams and observed in the past where the interviewer is asking a completely different list of questions to each person that walks in. They're approaching each interview differently. That's really makes it really hard to have a fair impression of that person when you're not being really across the board the same. You make your decisions based on first impressions. You develop a bias towards that person maybe by the way they shook your hand when they walked in the door. And those kinds of things we have to be very careful of too. Another thing we have to be very careful of is when we have people we interview that are a lot like we are. Maybe you're very outgoing and very friendly. Then when the person walks in the door and they're very outgoing and friendly, you immediately say, oh, this is a perfect candidate. And we got to be careful that we don't lean that way just simply because they match you similar. They're very similar to you. And then finally is judging a candidate based on body language alone. A lot could be learned from body language, but let's face it, a lot of people get nervous. A lot of people are, and this is not an environment where they're in normally. So we want to make sure that we are not we're not allowing our bias to slip in and dismiss someone too quickly. We could be missing that person that's the perfect fit for the job.
Yeah. When those biases get in the way, then we start losing sight of some of the things that we really should be focused on, like, does this person fit our culture? Is their attitude, their character, from what you can see, is that someone who can be dropped into your team and function well? And so, you're going to hear us talk a lot about that. That to us, that's the most important. That's what our focus is on. So you can't skip that step. You want to make sure that they're going to be a good fit there, because bringing the wrong person in, like Travis said at the beginning of the webinar, is toxic. It's like you're entering into a really bad place, and it could do some real damage. And so there's a lot of things here that I see us doing wrong. Right, we're missing our due diligence. We're making assumptions. Maybe we're not reading or using our resources, or we're lacking them. We have biases. And so how do we respond to some of those things that are issues, Travis? Where can we begin to make strides and improve ourselves in those areas?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that we can do rather quickly that will help us, especially when we're talking about on the interviewing side of things. Obviously, when I say due diligence, let's make sure that you slow down the process. One of the things that I realize when people do interviewing is too often they'll stack the interviews, where they'll have 4 or 5 people waiting in the lobby for an interview, and what are you doing? You're rushing. So due diligence is making sure that, you know what, you may need to schedule more time to be able to sit down and adequately interview these people where you don't feel pressured to move them through just so that you don't have them people waiting in the lobby. So if that may mean scheduling them out throughout the day or scheduling multiple days, I believe that's an investment of time that's worth getting to the right person so that you can make the decision. Because yes, recruiting can be a very challenging thing. It's very time consuming, but in the long run, in the big scheme, in the big picture, you're looking to save yourself that time, that effort once you have that employee you've been looking for installed in and they're doing their job well. Another thing is just having a standardized process for interviewing, especially if there's more than one person interviewing. Have a process developed that is very clear on how you do interviews. And that's something we could definitely go into offline if any of you ever want to have that conversation. Set the standard also for your questions. Like I said at the very beginning, make sure that you're not just randomly throwing questions out to the person you're interviewing. Try to be as consistent as with each person of asking the questions, so that you can have good data and you can have good information to work from. So just being standardized in that. Make sure you take notes. We want to make sure we're giving that person our attention, but make sure you're taking notes and make sure you're engaging. Because I've interviewed people in the past and didn't take notes, and 15 minutes later, I can barely remember anything that went on. So the highlights, the important things to remember, make sure we're writing them down. Another fun one, don't go with your gut. I've had some conversations even just recently with someone I was working with recruiting, and they were just kept saying, my gut tells me to hire this person. And I'm like, that's okay. But, let's look at the whole picture, the information you have in front of you. I'm not saying don't ever go with your gut, but I'm going to tell you, don't make that your decision maker in all hiring situations. Make sure you have multiple candidates. A lot of times we're in a hurry. We want to fill the position as quickly as possible. We maybe have one or two people come in and we just make a quick decision. I always encourage people to, pull in as many people as you can for that initial interview, so that you can actually have a good comparison to look at. If you only have two, it's really hard to compare. If you have 4 or 5, then you really kind of see the different dynamics and the options that you have to make the best decision. And then finally, I'd say just build a diverse group of candidates, different backgrounds as far as experience levels, education levels, time in the workforce. Make sure that that you're looking at all your different options so that you actually have the best option put forward. And I think the most important thing that you can do is make sure to ask this question to yourself: do you feel like you can work with this person? That's a huge question I don't think we ask enough, especially if this person is going to be working with you in a small business or a direct report. You need to ask yourself the question: do I feel like this is somebody that I could, sit across a desk with every day for the next 2-3 years? And if you don't, then I would highly suggest that you not take a very deep look into that before you make the hire. But those are just a few of the things that you can do to fix it. We can go on for days, Brian, about that one, but that's just a few I had put down here.
No, for sure. All good. I that's a good one, right? Can I sit across from you all day, let alone weeks? Can I make it one day across? And so something to think about. We often just go straight to those skills and focus solely on what those bullet points are in the resume. But that attitude and that character and those things fall out of folks shortly thereafter coming into the workforce, and can be quite a challenge. And so it's good to know that there are things that we can do to be better. So how do we help, Travis? Right? So we'll just, all right, everybody, beware. We're 25 minutes in. This is the sales portion. Okay. How do we help, Travis, or how are we helping folks now with things. So talk a little bit about that, what we're seeing, and how we're going about that, and then I'll wrap us up with kind of next steps and Q&A.
Yeah, this is when everyone runs for the exits,
Yeah,
right?
right. I gave them fair warning. They're still here, so you know.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that we can help with in this area. I like to say, Brian, we kind of offer an a la carte option when it comes to recruiting. And the reason I say that is because we work with a lot of different small businesses of different sizes that have different needs. And so we don't really have a check the box method that we apply to every single company we work with. So really, it begins at the very beginning. We help companies define the roles that need to be filled, and like you said earlier, Brian, there has been situations where you may come to the realization that you need to hire a different position than maybe you initially thought of, or maybe you don't need to hire the position at all. And any day we can walk away, even if we're not going to be recruiting for your position, we see it as a win. It's all about getting you the right employee. It's about you getting the right team member on your staff that's going to be to help you forward. So we help companies define that role and help you kind of get an idea of where you're wanting to go. We also help you with job descriptions, because that is something in 2024 that is very, very important to being able to get applications that are actually relevant to the work that you're applying for. So being able to write, strategic, compelling job descriptions is something that we often help organizations with. Advise on posting strategies. Like I said, we've learned through some process of elimination where the best places are to post for certain positions. And I'll just give you a very perfect example. We've worked with I worked with one organization recently where we were actually able to recruit using one of the sites, one of the search engines for job searches that really didn't cost anything. But because of that job position, I knew that it would be very easy to search out candidates that way. There's been other positions where I've had to say, we're going to have to put, a little bit of money and investment on boosting the post so that we can find quality candidates. And those are things that we can advise you on as we walk through this process of being able to kind of give you guidance on what are those best steps. Obviously, nothing's perfect, nothing's guaranteed, but we have seen quite often what success looks like and where are the best levers to pull to get the best results when it comes to where we post. We also help source candidates and screen candidates. So if that's something where you're saying, you know what, Travis, I have way too much on my plate already, and hiring is something I've put off because of that, we also help narrow down that pool. Like I said, we just recently I worked with an organization that had close to 100 applications for one position, and we were able to whittle that down to 4 applications from which they were able to interview and choose their candidate. That's huge. That's a huge savings. We just took something from, basically somebody's full-time job for a week at minimum, down to a couple of hours for them to meet with these applicants and then make a decision. One of the big things we offer, Brian, I think this is the game changer, is we have a couple of different assessments. We have what we talked about in previous webinars is the DISC assessment. We also have something called the benchmark report, which if you want to check that out, go back to the previous webinar we did. Brian, we'll find a way to send that out to people if they want it, where we go in depth into both the DISC and how we use that and the benchmark report and how that all works together to help you find quality candidates for the job. Because like I said, it's not just about skills, it's also about personality. And we can help you figure those things out. And finally, we assist you with onboarding, and we can help you with follow-up as far as onboarding. We don't have time today to go into it, but man, oh man, how many companies have I worked for over the years that just they fail to do onboarding well. And you just recruited this great candidate, and now you fall off not being able to do the onboarding well. So we can help you through that process if that's something that you see as that you may need. But I'll say that say all this to say this is that, we will help you through the process wherever you are at the moment. And that really begins with just having a conversation.
Yeah, and we're talking about a kind of a marathon here, right? And this is really the first leg of kind of recruitment, and then we move into onboarding, and then other things, kind of growth track down the in the other stages. But really, it's just that customization, just kind of bringing to the table, hey, it sounds like you need kind of this, you're good there, and maybe you need this piece. It's about us kind of filling those gaps and making sure that those pieces are in there, or being able to, kind of start to finish, get to that place of narrow margins where now you're looking at 2 or 3 candidates, and you're just kind of making the final call there. And so whatever works, and so that's the flexibility that we offer. And remember, this is one piece, a part of a whole big puzzle. The assessments that Travis was talking about, these are things that can be done in the beginning and ongoing, or for some of the folks that you have there now. And it's all about making sure that we're always growing and cultivating that culture, and that's our goal, is to have that good culture. Because if we get kind of those things set, that foundation rocking and rolling, then I think the rest of it kind of does what it needs to do. And so, well, let me kind of land this here, the last little thing, and then we'll switch over to just Q&A. And I've got a couple that have kind of slid in various different ways here, Travis. But really, it's just kind of connecting. Travis is really our main point leader here in this particular space with learning and development. This is, as you heard from him today, he's loading books behind him. If you can see his little picture, he's got like a bunch. He must be smart, got all them books. I don't know, but and so I think he knows what he's doing here. But just reach out to him, connect with him, give us a call, and that's really where it starts. Is kind of just him trying to figure out on a discovery call of how to help and how can we kind of assist you and get you moving in the right direction. And also, if you get a chance, Travis, we mix up the webinar and the podcast. Oh, we've got too many places for content around here, but our podcast is another area for content that we've got over there, all kinds of different things as well. Our goal is just to connect with our clients and our folks that support us and people that we support to help grow them, for sure. And so, questions. Let me double check a couple different places. So here's a couple questions that came in. And one is, you had mentioned earlier, but maybe you said it too fast. Someone asked, where did your data come from? I think maybe in that first slide they're referencing there.
Okay, yeah.
There.
Probably, yeah. That one they're probably asking about that most of that data actually come from Career Builder. Yeah, everything we reference could be pretty easily found in their research. They're one of the more trusted, so I definitely lean on them a lot for research purposes.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time. I tell you what, the fun part of this job here is spending a lot of time researching and learning and growing and understanding, because the landscape is constantly shifting, and who's coming in, and I mean who are we hiring, and baby boomer versus this generation. So there's so much movement. It requires a significant amount of learning and understanding the data. And so on that wrong slide, what is the most important thing you were going through, kind of where we were going wrong? You mentioned wrong assumptions, lack of resources, we're not doing our due diligence, interview bias, not a good culture fit. Out of those, what do you think is probably the top issue?
I would definitely say due diligence is probably the one that I see the biggest challenges are for business owners, and it's mainly because there always seems to be a this needs to be done yesterday kind of mentality, and I get that, and look, I've been in those shoes before, But I think it's really important that when you're in that recruiting process, unless you want to be doing it again in a couple of weeks or months, that you are slowing down and making sure that you're going through the steps and doing your due diligence on getting to know the potential candidate before you extend an offer and you start to invest all those resources into getting them up to the job. So I'd say definitely that, and I would say just make sure that you're slowing down when you finally are trying to get at that point where you're ready to make an offer to someone.
Yeah, I get it. You know, we need to make a hire, and oh yeah, we needed to make that hire a week ago, and so
Yeah.
slow down is very difficult to do. But it'd be better to endure the pain of maybe longer hours or picked up shifts and make a good decision, so then you can stop it moving forward, right? The pain, and
Yeah.
so definitely. No other last question that came in. I don't see anything in the webinar kind of chat area here. Last one, which I can answer. Does this cost $1 million, Brian? 2 question marks. Well, no, it does not cost $1 million for our help, and so it depends on what you're asking for us to do, but not $1 million for sure. And so I would say probably the biggest focus is, you know, kind of go back to that number that Travis shared at the very beginning. You know, the average cost per hire is approximately $4,129. And so the reality is that hiring someone just to get them to the table of will you accept this offer costs that. That's the dollar amount, okay? That's not the benefits. That's not the parking spot. That's not the cell phone. That's whatever the training. That's none of those things. And so this is a significant investment that you are making of money and time. And so I would say that it would be better to take your time and do things the best way you can and use the resources that we provide the best way that you can and make a good hire. And so because you can hire the right employee for sure, it's doable. We see it. We're helping our clients do it. And so, well, I don't think anybody ever got mad if we ended the webinar early, Travis. What do you think?
No, I think we've got it all covered. So yeah, just reach out if you think there's any value here, and or if we can help you guys out, and be happy to assist you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for everyone for attending. We appreciate you. And check us out at those places that I shared. And you guys be well and have a wonderful rest of your day.